Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Shawn Freligh. He's Senior VP and General Manager at Upland Software. Welcome, Shawn.
Hey, John, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, excited for this discussion. I think there's a lot to talk about. Upland is known for fax, but man, we've seen a revolution, evolution of fax over the years, and especially with AI. So I think there's a lot to talk about. But before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself and Upland Software and InterFAX.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to, John. Again, thank you for having us on the show today. So, Shawn Freligh, I'm the Senior Vice President and a General Manager within Upland Software. I have about 25 years in the world of fax and imaging and document workflow out there. So, I've been doing this for a very long time. And I work for a company, as I said, Upland Software. We are a global organization that has 26 plus different products out there that range across the spectrum of offering enterprise business services. The specific unit that I run within the organization really is centered around documents and contents and how do you move that data around. And fax just happens to be one of those, which kind of leads me into our InterFAX online cloud fax platform. Which has been around for decades at this point, solving the needs of customers out there and organizations and moving those faxes around and unlocking the data that exists there. So I'm happy to be here to talk a little bit about what those products do and what a little bit about artificial intelligence within the faxing market to give your audience a flavor of what's kind of happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've often told people fax is the most interoperable part of healthcare. So, it's interesting that, and it's still widely used. And certainly we've seen an expansion of the discussion to more document management and sharing documents. But talk to me about why is fax technology still relevant in healthcare?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, John, I guess I would maybe turn around and ask you a question. When's the last time that you've sent a fax, personally?
I had to do one for the government, another one that's right there with healthcare as far as using faxing. So I think it was about 3 months ago. I had to fax a document to the government, the only way I could send it to them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, and I think you kind of just hit the nail on the head, right? For the most part, individuals really are not faxing anymore today, right? We don't really have a need for that because there's different communication mediums. But fax is actually still very relevant, even though we might not be doing it from traditional fax machines, walking up to that old Tandy machine over here or the Xerox machine, right? We're not sending them as individuals going back and forth because we have other means. But that doesn't mean that it's not still relevant. And it is super relevant still in the healthcare industry and also in the financial industry and some other verticals out there. But particularly in the healthcare industry, what we see, it's a way to transmit data. It's a way to move a document from one facility to another facility, right? Whether that be a referral or a prescription drug that needs to be processed at the local pharmacy, right? It's a way to securely transact documents and move that data from one location to the other. So when we talk about relevancy, again, it's not you and me trying to communicate back and forth. What it is it's moving those documents and getting them from one system to another system. I'll give you a great example. If I can do that, if we just have a
That'd
second.
be great.
I moved from one location that I'm in currently today to about 2 hours away to another home. And I had to, like so many of us, I had to sign up for a new doctor out there, right? I had to find another medical facility. And so I did. And I had to have those medical records transferred from my original doctor, my original provider, up to the other provider. Well, there's really only three ways that that happens today. And that is they either print everything out from facility A and they pop it in the mail and it gets snail mailed up over to that other facility. And what do they do with it? They turn around and scan all of that back in, right? So they scan pieces of paper and then you have to pay somebody to sit there and go through, is this nursing notes? Is this referrals? What was the history of this patient, right? To categorize everything. The other way that they do it is obviously through secure exchange, but those things today, there's so much differences between secure exchange. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of standards that go between them, that everybody's kind of using the same ones that feed each other correctly in the way that we need to. So what's the other way? Faxing, right? Faxing is still, it's considered HIPAA compliant. It gets all past all of the security standards, right, to be able to safely transmit this. And the other thing that it does, because it's still kept in electronic form, right? Because it's generally on the other side, not being printed out, we can take that information and we can automate that information into that other system, into that other healthcare facility, right? We can take that and we can start looking and categorizing those things that I might have to pay somebody who scanned that information in to go through and categorize. I can do that automatically through the technology. So that's why faxing today is still relevant, and particularly in the healthcare market, because it is a way of communicating securely and reliably information, right? Documents that need to go from one provider to the next or one facility to the next. That's why it's still relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I often say that the beauty of fax is that it has one standard that can accommodate any format of
Yep.
data, right? And second is we know the endpoints. We know the fax number for every facility because it's on everyone's website. They can go grab it anytime you want. If we could solve that in another way, we would do it, but we haven't yet.
Absolutely. And the fact is there's still, as we know, that, mainframes, IBM still sells and builds mainframes that talk on old technology, old operating system, right? That don't have the ability to talk to newer platforms, newer technology. So what is the way that you can transform and transition and transmit those documents? It's still through fax and that older technology.
Yeah, not to mention long-term post-acute care SNFs who didn't get the stimulus money, so they don't even have an EHR. How are they supposed to do it? So, yeah, absolutely. Now, we kind of teased the idea of AI and how it's changing this entire market. Talk to me, how does AI fundamentally change the landscape when it comes to fax?
Mhm. You know, great question. So in terms of facts, I think I've already somewhat kind of hit on this, right? It doesn't eliminate the need for fax communications. It doesn't fundamentally change the fax itself, right? Because if we go back to why is fax still relevant? It is because it is the transmission of a document from one place to the other, right? It's moving that document around as necessary versus um, you know, unsecurely attaching it to an email and sending it, or putting it into the mail or the post, right? It's a way to do that. So fundamentally, AI doesn't change the transmission. What AI is out there doing today, especially through generative AI, which is obviously the talk of the town. Every board is talking about it. Every technologist is talking about it, right? Where can we apply these things? And I think that it starts to actually change the conversation around fax in terms of document workflow, in terms of the digitization that exists within that fax. I can now encapsulate and capture the ability to make that data more useful, provide intelligence around that data, and then automate it more. I can't do that again if it went through the mail, right, without scanning it in and going through all of those steps. So when we start thinking about, you know, how AI transforms the fax industry, it's making faxes more smart, it's making them intelligent, and it's putting them more efficiently into the distribution workflow and or the processing workflow that you already have. So consider for a second, right, that I have a prescription drug that needs to go to the pharmacy, and that pharmacy requires a signature from the doctor, right? Instead of looking at that document and having somebody look at that and make sure that it has the signature, what about if we can automatically detect if the signature is on that document, right? I can automatically detect that and get it past that quality check automatically so that somebody's not looking at that and it goes to the next step and gets fulfilled faster, right? It goes back to being able to do things like document classification, right? Is this a set of nursing notes? Is it a referral? Is it an image, right? What are those things? If I can start to detect and automate and provide the intelligence around that document, I can streamline and make the downstream process more efficient, more flexible, and more enabled to speed up all those things that ultimately mean, in a lot of cases, better healthcare, right? Better care by the provider, better efficiency, right? Especially the whole healthcare industry, as we know, is working with less, right? There's so much less out there that we have to find those efficiencies in companies like ourselves, right, that deal with content and moving content and making things smarter and more efficient, are dealing with this today, and especially dealing with it around fax through our InterFAX platform.
Yeah. Well, and the reality for many organizations is they can't even hire enough people to do that, for lack of a better term, lower level work, right? Entry level work. It's hard to find the right people. So they need to automate those solutions, have automated solutions for that. So that's interesting.
It's also the safety around that too, right? Whenever you have a non-automated process and you're relying on people to do that work, not only is it less efficient, but you also introduce risk, and you introduce the lack of safety measures in there, which we can streamline those things by introducing these things.
No, that's great. You're 100% right as far as the AI at least is predictable in the safety, whereas humans aren't, which I think is a powerful idea. You mentioned about generative AI. I'd love to hear more about how you're able to, use this cutting edge technology that's changing every day, along with the tried and true facts to create value for organizations. Is it in the categorization that you talked about? Or, I love the signature example. I hadn't heard that one before. How are you leveraging generative AI with fax?
So we have a multi-step approach within our organization. I think in the market generally, right, when Microsoft here, what was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, kind of in that April 2023 timeframe, I guess it was, you really launched generative AI to the marketplace. And that's kind of when all of everybody's ears went up, right? Every boardroom, every CEO, every CIO, right? We were all talking about, how does this benefit? How does this change our world, right? There's very few pieces, at least in my technology career, which is at this point is a long time. I'm dating myself a little bit, but it
We've
goes
all
back.
been
There's, there's very few points when I can say, okay, the world was just hit. The technology world was just hit by a Mack truck, right? Like everybody stopped and went, oh, how do we deal with this? And again, it was like, how do we utilize the technology? How do we integrate the technology? What about all of the compliance, the legal risks, are we infringing on IP and all these things? Well, that was all a start, right? That we had to deal with. But AI has been out there for years, right? Decades that we've been talking about artificial intelligence. And I think in our products, right, we think about this kind of in the different tiers that you have, right? Different disciplines. So everything from machine learning, right? So OCR technology, optical character recognition technology, is a form of machine learning. We've had this technology in our products for well over a decade, right? Because it's been in use, and that helps to automate things. That helps to turn data into something that is a mineable format, right? I can mine that data and extract that data. Um, Natural language processing, right? Being able to ask friendly questions of something and get that data back. We've been dealing with that for a long time. But the generative piece, right, has really started to change the game. But we leverage all of these within our products. And I think specifically around the generative AI piece, we can start doing things like document summarization, right?
Mm.
What are the key bullets of a document? What are the key takeaways? So if I get again, a referral package that has all of these images and notes in it and everything, what about if I can run that through the system and I can pull out what are the key themes, what are the key pieces of data, whether that is, patient information, their account number, their diagnosis, right? The history, the high levels, pull that out and summarize that and provide that to the provider up front. Or we can put that into the automated workflow so that they can pull that out and split that off in their downstream processing as needed. We talked a little bit about the document signature, right? Being able to just detect, is this document signed? That's not really a form of generative AI. That is a form of machine learning, artificial intelligence through document categorization and recognition. But those things exist. Being able to recognize the document, again, what type of document? Is it a referral or is it prescription? Right? Because these two documents need to take a different path within the healthcare organization, right? They're handled by different people. So we can provide the intelligence there. One of my favorite is PII, right? Being able to automatically redact personally identifiable information before it goes on, or at least detect it, right? What about if I have somebody who accidentally goes to fax out a document, a healthcare record, and they didn't realize that they were including in that document some places PII about that patient because they're sending it someplace else that they don't mean to. Well, what about if we can stop that fax and say, no, that actually shouldn't go out because we've identified that PII, right? That personally identifiable information. All of these things, again, utilize these technologies and can be built into the workflow in order to make that document transition more intelligent, more enabled for workflow, and more efficient.
Yeah, I love that. My favorite is actually using it to detect spam, which who would have thought we still have spam in faxes? That's shameful and sad, but reality. So I
I
love these
still get the
gadgets.
menus and I still get the travel destinations.
I don't know how that still works and why people are still doing it, but they are. So, yep, absolutely. As we talk, it's interesting to think about facts because if I think about some of the technology leaders at healthcare organizations, my guess is that many of them look at facts and say it's kind of a commodity. So, what are the questions that healthcare providers should be asking their cloud fax providers to kind of differentiate them what they might think is a commodity, which probably isn't when you dive into the details?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think it's hard to say that faxing over the years, when we think about it, especially when you need to fax something to the government, as you mentioned earlier on, or the occasional I'm going to send something to my bank, right, that requires a wet signature or something like that, right? Most people out there, right, from an individual standpoint, uh, would fax very little, or maybe once a year, or maybe not at all, right? Like that percentage is very low. So I think when we think about it that way, it is a commodity, right? It is just a phone transaction that takes place between two fax machines, and there's very little value other than transmitting that document from point A to point B. I think where you start to change that paradigm and where the value add really comes into play is going to be around the intelligence and streamlining those workflows, right? We're not just a fax platform or a fax provider. Again, we're really a content automation provider, right? A document automation provider. We are serving document workflows and the digitization of those workflows, again, to make them smarter, to provide the intelligence around that, and to do all of the things that we talked about, provide better safety, better patient interactivity, faster care, right? All of those things that were kind of mentioned throughout this conversation are extremely important. So when you start to take those and you start to think about the value with those, to me, it's no longer really a commodity. This is a necessity, right, that we have to think about. So what are some of the things that I think people need to be asking of their fax providers at the end of the day? Is one is you got to determine what are you doing, right? For us, we're not really in, I would say, the consumer fax business. Again, I'm not really, John, looking for individuals like yourself to send that one time a year document to the government, or to that fax provider. We're selling directly to providers themselves, technologists that provide platforms to providers, because we're adding that extra value capability there to drive a solution. And so we're really focused around, those enterprise organizations that need to just transfer that information to get it from one point and get it into their workflow, get it into whatever their in process is, into their systems. And that's the piece that we're driving. So we focus heavily on API integration, right? We talked about, IBM still sells those mainframes out there because that is, technology that's still used, but it needs that transmission platform, like a fax, to get it from point A to point B. Um, we're really looking at, like, how do we drive that in scale? And so we focus very heavily on things like APIs, right? And how do we secure those APIs? How do we make sure that it's efficient to talk to? I can guarantee that the fax went. I can get that receipt back. All of those different things are very important. So I would be asking you, your listeners should be asking their providers that, right? Like, how do they deal with scale? How do they deal with safety and security? How do they deal with compliancy questions that might be in specific to the healthcare market, like HIPAA, as we all know that word, right? There,
We
but how do
do.
we deal with that? And then also too, I think fundamentally is, how are you as a provider, as a fax provider, how are you better enabling and providing the intelligence around these documents? How are you providing value add versus just transmitting that document? I think those are the questions that people need to be asking in order to get the most out of this technology, because it is still, at the end of the day, right? It's still a medium. It's still kind of a necessary evil of what we do, and we need to make sure that we plug it in the most responsible, efficient, and intelligent way that we can.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Fax isn't going away. In some ways, it's increasing as we want to share more data, and value-based care is going to drive the need to share more data and across it. And we're seeing it across many different organizations: acute care with post-acute care, referrals, etc. But I'd love to hear more. Tell me more about your offering. What are you doing at Upland Software with your InterFAX product? I'd love to hear some of the EHR integration, because that's part of this. I mean, at the end of the day, you're almost more of a workflow product than you are anything else, is enabling a workflow to be able to share data. But tell me more about your offering and what you're able to provide provider organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, our platform has been around for a long time as faxing. It's a scalable platform. It's a worldwide platform. So we have the ability to fax worldwide. We have the ability to receive faxes worldwide. So depending the scale of your organization, we can expand and contract with that again uh, from a worldwide footprint, which is very important out there. Um, we also, again, we focus very heavily on integrations. We have a very, very robust API platform that allows not only for us to do integrations, but for others to do integrations out there, right? The EMRs, the HRs, all these different systems out there, in order to be able to facilitate those transactions, right? Those transmissions. It's very simple to do it through our APIs. And that's really where our bread and butter is, right? That's really where we focus, as I mentioned, because what we're trying to do is provide that document workflow and intelligence. Getting the document from point A to point B just happens to be across the faxing technology, right? As a medium to communicate that. We're also very focused in, again, moving things forward and providing that value add. So we have been in the AI space, right? Providing that technologies and different feature sets of AI for a long time, whether or not that be optical character recognition, whether that be, forms identification or PII detection. But we look at all of those things, and we have been integrating and working with a lot of that technology for many years. We have started to, instead of thinking about these things in a lot of a la carte ways, though, where somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, I'd like to detect this, or the signature, or I'd like to look at PII information." Instead of looking at those as a feature set, right? We generally have looked at those as a la carte per customer, per workflow that they have, solution that they need. But what we're doing is we're now taking these and we're moving forward with bundling those up into more of a service that allows you to utilize the feature sets that you want to take, and utilize those through the platform. And you can pick and choose depending on what your workflow requires. And we're launching that as our InterFAX+AI solution. But again, we've been doing this for a long time, but we're actually bundling it and putting it into into the marketplace as a bundled solution. So those are some of the things that we're doing in the marketplace today. Again, while also being very focused on those things like safety, things like compliancy, efficiency, and intelligence. All of those things are still very important to us.
Yeah. Love that. And it is interesting how this whole space has evolved, right? OCR and NLP, we don't talk about as much now, but because it's just there and available, right? And yeah, I wonder how that's going to evolve for AI, right? Like it's such a buzzword right now and a hot topic, and how are we using AI? And eventually we're like, well, yeah, of course our fax solution identifies which document it is. We won't say it's AI. We'll just say, oh, that's just a feature of faxing in digital fax in the future.
Oh, absolutely agree. I mean, the world is changing very fast. Um, and it's exciting to see where it's going and how the technology can be applied to, again, technology that's been around for some time, right? And just seeing where it evolves at the end of the day. Super excited, but Uplands and the InterFAX team, we're always on the forefront of working as hard as we can to make sure that we're constantly innovating in the space and driving the value for our customers to ensure, goes back to your question, that we're not just providing a solution that's a commodity, right? We really want to provide a solution for customers out there that adds value and brings together all of those aspects of the fax and the digitization and the workflow that's required for that.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, I appreciate you coming on and sharing about what's happening, especially how AI is being applied to fax and helping to make more efficient processes for healthcare organizations. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Shawn.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.